Smell that? That was a fist fight among us, boys. Jose Young's here at MMAfighting.com, live on the scene at the UFC 245 post-fight press conference. It just wrapped up behind us. Joining us is Stephen Marrocco of MMAfighting.com and Oscar Willis of The Backlife. We're going to talk fist fighting, everyone. For those of you who did not watch, we're going to start with the main event where Kamaru Usman broke Colby Covington's jaw. Colby Covington did not break his own jaw, as people were saying on Twitter. But Kamaru Usman did successfully defend his UFC welterweight championship against Colby Covington with a fifth-round TKO. It was later learned that Colby actually did severely injure his jaw. I don't know the exact medical phrasing. There was some questions whether it was fractured.
Mandible fracture.
Midline mandible fracture. There was some questions about if he did break it or did he not. But we'll start with you, Stephen. A lot was made with the stoppage. Did you agree with it? Colby Covington was visibly angry when referee Mark Goddard pulled Kamaru Usman off him late in the fifth round, 50 seconds left. Later tweeted that they robbed us of a fair fight. So what did you make of the stoppage?
Not a robbery. I mean, it's not a typical stoppage position to be shooting for a takedown and have a stoppage take place. But I can see why Mark Goddard did it, because at the time that he did stop it, Colby had actually withdrawn his hand and started to cover his face, and he wasn't moving. So when you're not moving and you're protecting yourself, that's not necessarily an active defense. They want you to move. They want you to show that you're trying to get out of that position. When you cease to move, that's when you open yourself up for the stoppage. So a little bit of an odd position, historically in my mind, when I think of where fights get stopped, but not a controversial stoppage, in my opinion.
And switching over to you, Oscar, there was a lot made of the scorecards that were released at the end. One judge had it 3-1 Kamaru, one judge had it 3-1 Colby, and one had it 2-2. Dana White himself said he had it 3-1 Usman. I had it 2-2 going into the final round. What did you make of the scorecards being everywhere, and what was your scorecard going into that final frame?
Well, I think the scorecards being everywhere reflects on the fight itself. I mean, those first two rounds are essentially a coin toss. The story going into this fight was how equal these guys were, and I think until Kamaru sort of pulled away in the third and then Covington brought it back in the fourth, they were exactly equal. In fact, at the post-fight press conference, Kamaru said it was mano a mano, and indeed during the fight it felt like he'd punch him, get punched back, and it was 1-for-1 almost. As for my scorecards, I would say 2-2 going in. I think, as I said, the third and the fourth are the only two clear ones, and you could argue either way about the first two. But for me, so often we have a narrative going into a fight that never really gets met. Dana White even said at the press conference, these grudge matches don't live up to the hype. The narrative leading into this one was these two are evenly matched. And I think until essentially the last minute of the fight, basically, they were completely even.
Well, switching back to you, Stephen, there were a lot of questions over where does Kamaru go from here. Someone brought up maybe a title fight against Jorge Masvidal. His exact response was who? And he brought up Leon Edwards, who he'd said is in the same situation he was a year ago, where he has this long win streak. No one really wants to fight him. He's doing everything the UFC asks. He's just not getting the fights he wants, and he's not getting his title shot. So if you're the UFC and you're Kamaru Usman, who are you looking to fight next?
Well, that's a pretty accurate description of Leon Edwards' career as of late. And so the competitive side of me says that he should probably get the next title shot. The side of me that thinks about the success of the events and what would sell better, I think obviously Jorge Masvidal's got a pretty hot hand. And you can still do the team versus team rivalry. And that I think will be successful. I think Kamaru is he's going to be one of those fighters who needs a good opponent, to get, to move the needle, so to speak. So if I had to pick which one, always leaning a little bit more towards the sporting aspect of it, I would pick Leon Edwards.
And I think the big storyline coming into this fight, Oscar, was Colby Covington's gimmick. Well, he was very pro Donald Trump. He walked around with a "Make America Great." He is. I don't know if you saw the shirt he was wearing. It said Trump 2020 all week. Oh, okay. He had the "Make America Great Again" hat. He was reading a little book called Triggered during that.
Reading that.
Apparently, still reading it back from the UFC 245 press conference in November. It seems like there was this cloud over this fight. It wasn't a welterweight championship fight. This was Kamaru Usman from Nigeria, an immigrant who moved here when he was 8, now fighting Colby Covington, really the face of this Trump 2020 movement in MMA. Him and Tito Ortiz kind of seem to take that baton and run. So is there this cloud over this, leading this? Can we really appreciate this win that Kamaru Usman had as a champion, or is this just another is this storyline too pro wrestling where this immigrant defeated this man who many people point as a heel, as they say in professional wrestling?
Well, I think if you remember back to the media day when they did their face-off and he's in this Trump regalia and Kamaru's in more of a traditional African garb, it was a very striking contrast. And it did feel like, it was like a pantomime, as we say in the UK. It was like a crazy show. But I actually think when this fight got announced, I actually anticipated all this stuff was going to be worse. I thought it was going to get more vitriolic and stuff like that. And really, while Colby said some unpleasant stuff this week, I never really felt it got as bad as it could have been. Maybe that's because my imagination can go to worse places than Colby's. I don't know. But I actually, as far as that sort of angle and did it get too pro wrestling, I think that stuff is negated by the fight itself. If one had come out and smashed the other, then maybe we would still be talking about the gimmick. If Colby had won, certainly, and he did a big speech about Trump 2020 after the fight, it would definitely be the story coming out. But because it was just an absolute crazy technical barn burner with a mildly controversial but a decisive finish, I think thankfully people are kind of looking towards the athletic side of it, not the gimmick side of it. And a lot of that is because Usman won, so we didn't have Colby back here doing the gimmick and stuff.
If they were going for the gimmick, wouldn't we have seen more people in MAGA hats?
Yes. I mean,
wouldn't we have seen a fuller audience? Wouldn't we have seen more posts, tweets from conservative personalities? Like, I'm not sure the angle sold as well as perhaps they were expecting it to. I mean, save for Tito Ortiz and his crew in the 20th row.
Yeah, I don't know if you guys heard them, but they were probably the loudest people in the entire arena during that fight.
And I think they actually
projects a big voice.
Sure.
But they were the ones that were initiating the chants, which were initiating the counter chants, and that's kind of what everybody conceptualizes as. But apart from Colby doing a lot of traffic like he does, like we were talking about earlier, I'm not sure this was as big of a fight as it could have been.
Now, very quickly, did this main event lead up, exceed and meet expectations coming into this? Like what Dana White said, you seem to get these grudge matches, and then the fight happens, and it's a dud. But this fight actually won fight of the night. So, very quickly, did this meet expectations based on all of the vitriol leading up to this fight?
Yes, I mean, we live in the bubble, and I think this stuff, we live and breathe it. And so from the second they announced this, from their backstory, the storyline, Colby's personality, everybody in the MMA world loves to see somebody fail, and especially people that talk a lot. And so that alone made it a must-watch for me, and in that respect, it did.
Same question to you, Oscar. Did this fight exceed or meet expectations based on everything we saw leading up to the fight?
It absolutely exceeded expectations to me based on their fighting style alone. I thought we were going to see 25 minutes of wrestling against the cage from one man or the other. The fact it was a fight of the night with no takedown attempts from either man is incredible. I didn't think we were going to get a finish. We got a finish. So for me, I was actually expecting to sort of sit there and maybe, not doze off, but perhaps, just have a little yawn or something. So it definitely exceeded it for me.
Yeah, I mean, who would have thought we have three title fights, and the one with the stoppage is the one between Kamaru Usman and Colby Covington?
We were so close to 3 decisions, though. My prediction was so close.
50 seconds away, we'd have had 3 decisions. But we are going to move down to the co-main event, where Max Holloway, who Joe Rogan himself has declared the greatest featherweight of all time. Whether you agree, yes, consensus was his words. I don't really agree with that. We don't have to get into that. But Max Holloway was dethroned by Alexander Volkanovski in pretty dominant fashion. I mean, I think one of the scorecards had a 50-45 or 49-46, somewhere in there. So I will start with you, Stephen. What did you make of Alexander Volkanovski's? We were chatting Octagon side, and we were absolutely blown away with the game plan he displayed, where it seemed like everything Max had, Volkanovski knew where he was going to be, the position he was going to be with, and how to counter it. So how impressed were you with Alexander Volkanovski's performance?
Well, not only Alexander Volkanovski's game plan, but Max Holloway's seeming lack of game plan. Yeah. To me, the volume from him just wasn't there like it usually is. He didn't pick up a lot of speed. He seemed to be waiting a lot and allowing Alex to lead the dance, so to speak. So I think Alex had a great night, and Alexander had Max had an okay night, and Alexander had an exceptional night.
Right.
And in this game of inches, that's enough to take the title. I'm actually looking forward to seeing the rematch.
And you were at UFC 243 correctly in Melbourne, Australia.
Yes,
so Alexander Volkanovski is of course from Australia. He's part-time at City Kickboxing, same team as Israel Adesanya and Dan Hooker. So you witnessed what went down in Australia. So what does this win mean for that Australian crowd? That now, yes, Israel Adesanya is from New Zealand, but we're going to group that part of the world together. That region has yet another UFC champ.
Well, I think it's huge, right? Because they originally wanted to do Israel and Alexander Volkanovski fighting for the titles at the same time. Now they can just up that by having them defend the titles at the same time. So for that region, I think it's great. But I think Israel Adesanya is on the cusp of being a global thing anyway. There's rumors he's going to fight in Vegas in March and stuff like that. So perhaps if they want to move him to the States and get more gate money at Vegas, Alexander Volkanovski can then start headlining cards down under. So I think it's great. They always want champions in different regions. I think if they had a champion on every continent, they'd be very happy. And it makes sense from a business side of things. For me, I thought his performance was absolutely sensational. It reminds me in a way, if they're talking about doing the instant rematch, it also almost reminds me of when Randamie Nunes beat Joanna, because I actually think they run the risk of the previously dominant champion losing 2 solid decisions to the same person. Really devalues their brand for a long, long time. Even now, Joanna's nowhere near the star she once was, I feel. So I wonder if it's really the right thing to do is to have Max instantly rematch him. I think one day it would be good, but also I think you could possibly just take this moment and say, you know what, Max, take 9 months, eat a bunch of steak, and then let's try you at 55. Let's see if there's maybe don't throw him towards the Poiriers and the bigger guys there, but there are certainly some fights you could find for him at 55 that I think would be good for him right now at this point in his career.
And I do like the immediate rematch. I wouldn't be opposed to, like you said, take 9 months off and maybe not rematch Volkanovski. Maybe Volkanovski has a title fight between there, and then Max just comes back, a la Ronda Rousey, took a year off and came back and fought Amanda Nunes, not Holly Holm.
Do more media than she did.
Only do more media than she did.
We need clicks.
But we are running short on time in this 10, actually, so we're going to drop down to Amanda Nunes' decision win over Germaine de Randamie. Second win over Germaine de Randamie. She beat Germaine many years ago. They rematched again, this time for Amanda's Bantamweight Championship of the World. Not really the Amanda Nunes we've come accustomed to seeing over the last few months. We fresh in our mind, we have the win over Raquel Pennington. That was the doctor stopped it. The knockout win over Chris Cyborg, and then the head kick win over Holly Holm. Takes Germaine de Randamie to a decision in a very wrestling heavy-based game plan. What did you make of her performance against Germaine?
I mean, it's the way to win. If you're going to fight Germaine, she had time. She had several years to close that gap, but that's not enough when you're dealing with somebody like Amanda, who's been a well-rounded mixed martial artist for a long time. I think the more interesting thing for me was Germaine exposing something that I saw in the Kat Zingano fight, which is when you take her past the first round, you make her work in a lot of different positions. She can tire. And I think Germaine did a good job of that. But ultimately, I think what I was saying to you earlier was I'd love to see Germaine train at a place that emphasizes a more active guard and have her try to fight her way off her back and get back up. Because whenever she was on her feet, she was doing a really, really good job. She is a standout kickboxer. And I think Amanda did not want to stand with her and risk one of her 2 belts. So it was an intriguing matchup, but I don't fault Amanda at all for doing what she had to do to win the fight. She essentially, like I said before, she had to do what she had to do before and do it better. It wasn't necessarily impressive. We're conditioned to awesome fights from her, but you got to do what you got to do.
Now, what would you like to see Amanda do next? She did say she wanted to defend her 145-pound championship in her next fight. Dana White wants her to take a boxing match. She still has the 135-pound division is obviously really stacked. You cover boxing much more than me. She doesn't really want to do boxing. She said, if you want to come into my world, that's fine, but I don't want to box at all. So if you were Amanda and her team, are there any names you'd like to see her fight?
Well, actually, I'm going to be that douchebag and talk about the boxing thing.
Sure.
I think it's very funny and interesting to me that Clarissa Shields specifically said, after the talks we've been having, 80% chance that me and Amanda get it on. And then at the post-fight press conference, Amanda's like, I'm going to wrestle the shit out of you and tap you out. And you're going to regret it. We've done the boxing MMA stuff before, and it's been done to death. And the only reason I'm a bit different about this is I think Amanda's been so dominant now, we need her to take a little bit of time away to just let some new challengers either really rise up or have a couple rise together. So I actually wouldn't be opposed to this idea of a Clarissa Shields thing, as long as they cemented the fact that Shields came and got her ass kicked in MMA afterwards. That's the only, that's realistically the only way it works. I don't want to see another sort of McGregor Mayweather thing. I think we did that. It was fun for what it was, but we've moved past that now. But yeah, if I'm going to be the guy who's just always makes terrible decisions, I would have her do the Shield stuff right now.
I mean, I wouldn't hate it. And if she wants to do the 145-pound division, what names are even out there? Like Megan Anderson is coming off that win at UFC 243, so maybe you kind of throw her into that matchup. She would easily be the tallest fighter that Amanda Nunes has ever fought, so maybe that's an interesting storyline. But we are, again, running short on time. So, Steven, is there any other fights you really want to highlight, whether it's on the main card or the prelim card from UFC 245 here in Las Vegas?
Yes, Jose Aldo versus Marlon Moraes. That was a fight. I was completely wrong. Jose Aldo. Sorry. Jose Aldo did fantastic. He looked fantastic. He was the fighter that I remember, and did a great job. And I think he won the fight.
Yeah. And same question to you, Oscar. Any other fights outside of the top 3 title fights that you really want to spotlight?
Well, I did want to talk about Jose Aldo, but you just took it. So I'll talk about Peter Yan over Uriah Faber.
Pete Carroll would be eternally grateful for bringing the spotlight to Peter Yan.
Okay, well, this is for you, Pete. Peter Yan, I mean, what more can you say? I didn't think Dana White at the post-fight press conference said, "Oh, Uriah Faber looks good." He looks okay. I mean, he looked good until his face started getting smashed in, and that's who Peter Yan is right now. I think it's even crazier that Jose Aldo is going to skip ahead of Peter Yan for a title fight. It seems, just because that's his life. But yeah, I think. There was no doubt that Yan is like a serious contender at 135. And while, okay, Uriah Faber's not in the prime of his career, and I think his fighting style is sort of noticeably a generation behind, Yan switching stances, Faber's just throwing that old school overhand right. I still think his name on your resume is always impressive. And the fact that, he beat him up pretty convincingly and made a bloody mess. I thought it was a breakout night for Peter Yan.
And there's some storylines that were planted. I don't know if you saw that video clip, but Cody Garbrandt and Peter Yan kind of got into a little scuffle backstage. So Cody,
it's weird because Cody's usually so cool and calm and collected.
I know he's very calm, especially when it comes to watching his teammates fight, right?
Yeah, very loyal. Not, I'm sorry.
Yes. But for me, there's a few other names you want to point out. Jeff Neal looked very impressive against Mike Perry. Absolutely just a blitz through him. We were really trying to match make him of what to do next. I mean, I'll throw him against anyone in that 170-pound division. Matt Brown came back after 2 years and beat Ben Saunders very impressively. Irene Aldana might have just cemented herself as the next contender at bantamweight, where they're just absolutely brutal knockout of Callan Vieira with that hook. So there's a lot of fighters that performed very phenomenally. And the fact that we had that argument over who deserves post-fight bonuses, who gets these title shots next, it's not a bad time to end the UFC right now. Like, it's a good in this just for good.
We're going
this
out on
decade.
this one, guys.
It's not a bad end of the decade. It's not a bad end of the decade card, I should say. It was poor Frankie, right?
Yeah, he's meant to be the end of the year.
Well, I was talking about pay-per-view cards,
sorry.
The end of the year pay-per-view cards here in Las Vegas. It's usually on the New Year's Eve, but it's earlier in the month this year. Any other parting words you want to say about UFC 245?
I'll keep the candle burning for UFC Busan.
There you go. Look at that. He'll keep the candle burning for that.
That's excellent final words, Oscar. I'm glad you brought that up. But for Jose, that's Steven with MMA Fighting. This is Oscar. You can find all of our excellent content on YouTube. Oscar of the Mac Life, thank you for joining us once again. And we won't be at UFC Busan, but we'll be back early January 2020 for even more content here for the Conor McGregor Donald Cerrone fight. See you then.
We covered Bellator. Like we're just taking the year off.
Well, we're also covering Bellator, and we might even be a Ryzen. Who knows? We will be a Ryzen. So we'll see you next. You'll see you in January, UFC fans. For MMA fans, we'll see you at the end of the month. This is a nerd.